Okay, so why is plan giving important? We're going to unpack that. But I wanted to start with a question. And I have some involvement, especially with a group this size. So I'll be asking some questions. And I want to hear some of your feedback and questions as well and your experiences. But the first question is, we live in a society where board games are kind of a thing of the past. And it's all electronic, video. But I'm just curious, there are some board games that have withstood time. And so I'm going to throw out the first question. Does anyone in here still play board games? Okay. What are your favorite board games? Just throw out some names. Okay. Monopoly? Backgammon. Anybody remember Stratego? That was a military kind of game, two-person game. Okay, you're shaking your head. Yep. Okay, so there is one game that has really withstood time more than any other, and that game is what was just mentioned, Monopoly. Okay, remember that? I mean, has everyone at least played Monopoly in here? Right? So why is that game so great? Why has it withstood time? Remember the board? You want to get over to Park Place. You want to hit the free parking spot. And if you played like I did, most people, right, when you have your community or chance cards and you have to pay some money and you throw it in the middle of the board, and then whoever lands on the parking collects the money. That's at least how I used to play. So played it with our kids. Our kids will play with their grandkids. It has withstood time. A couple factors about Monopoly. Anybody know when it was created? 1933. So that's why it's withstood time. 1933. At that time, it sold for $2. So you could buy a Monopoly game for $2. And what's the total amount of money in the game? Anybody have a clue? I know, nobody. That's a tough one. $20,580 are in the game of Monopoly. And it's published in 47 languages. And I already mentioned the free parking. So why is it important? Making an impact before the lid is closed. So you're probably saying, what on earth does that have to do with plan giving? I'll come back to that at the end. Okay? So what are we going to look at today? The case for plan giving, right? If plan giving is important, what's the case to be made for plan giving? What is plan giving? So let me ask a question there too. Anybody want to throw out in your mind, in your own words? Is everybody familiar, have at least a basic knowledge of plan giving? Okay. So what is plan giving in your own words? What do you think about when you hear plan giving and legacy giving? Inheritance. Okay. And specifically what we're going to do with that, how we pass it on. Okay. Who's going to receive it?
I'd say the intentionality of blessing someone after you've done that.
Very good. The intentionality of blessing someone after you've passed away. And that's very key, the word intentionality, because if we're not intentional about it, who will be intentional about it? The government. Exactly, right? If we don't do it, the government's going to take care of it for us, and so we'll come back to that. Anything else about plan giving? Okay, all right. Well, we're going to unpack that. We're going to look at opportunities. And then we're going to get into legacy giving, which is a part of that, and that's where Money for Ministry focuses on how do we think about our legacy, how do we live it out, what's it mean to live out our legacy. Randy Alcorn, I've got his slide in here. He's got a great book, The Treasure Principle. A lot of our clients give that away to folks when they make a legacy gift. Everybody know The Treasure Principle? If not, it's a book you should get to know. But Randy Alcorn said, oh, it's probably been published 20 years ago. But I'll come back to that. We're going to look at setting goals, and then how do we start talking about legacy giving? How do we identify our most interested supporters? Now, again, I was in a breakout session yesterday about the whole donor acquisition, and then how do you move that donor to becoming a mid-major, and then to becoming a major donor, and then how do you incorporate even beyond that some legacy giving and plan giving? But important, regardless of what type of donor we're talking about, is how do we identify them, and then how do we get them to take action, and then what does this mean for your team when it comes to plan giving? So, A lot of numbers out there. You've heard about the greatest wealth transfer in history, really. It's underway. I think the early stages of it, when we first heard numbers, it's been already 10 years, and it was predicted to go out, 30, 40 years. So this chart here, giving by bequest. By the way, the word bequest is a technical term. We try to use more family language, just making a will versus the word bequest, but that's a more technical term. But you can see that whether you're looking at the inflation-adjusted dollars or the current dollars, the trend is the same. And you can see the extreme growth from 81 to 21. And if you look at 81 to 2001, you can see, for example, under the current dollars, 3.58 billion, and by 21 it was 20 billion. So 17 billion increase. But then from 2001 to 2021, you can see that it went from 20 billion to 46. So just an explosion there. And if you look back to what happened recently, right around COVID there, 2020, you can see there's a slight dip. And then look at how it shot back up. So we all kind of made it through COVID, and bequest giving has rebounded and has survived COVID. Anybody aware of this great opportunity over the next 30, 40 years? You've heard about it?
I'm sure you're going to tell us why that is happening, too.
Well, it's a transfer of wealth is one thing, and we'll come back to more points. So it's a golden age. It's a golden age of philanthropy, record intergenerational transfer. I think where that was mentioned, the inheritance. We've got a record look at all the businesses that are being formed. Look at all the young 20, 30-year-olds that are branching off, creating their own business. So we're seeing that. Estimates are as high as 41 trillion as far as this transfer. So it's just a huge, huge number, okay? And baby boomers are handing down about 53 trillion of that. So baby boomers are a key part of that transfer. So there you see it, 21%, the boomer generation, 21% of the population, but they hold 53% of the wealth. So half of the wealth held by the boomer generation. 9 trillion will change hands in the next 10 years. Again, the numbers vary. You see all kinds of different numbers. But the point here is that it's trillions and trillions of dollars. Does anybody have a clue what trillions looks like? We're going to get into that. And 68 trillion expected to change hands in the next 2+ decades. So 9 trillion in the first 10 years, or the next 10 years, and up to 68 trillion. I mean, we can't even fathom what 68 trillion looks like because it's just an incredible number. Okay. And what's the average estate gift in the U.S. for all nonprofits, not just evangelical or ministries? 57,000 and growing. Now you're going to hear different numbers. As we work with some clients, we use a more conservative 50,000 when we talk to some of our rescue missions about the average size of a legacy gift, just to be more conservative. And obviously, from folks like Durham and others who are in here, they've gotten some gifts, I'm sure, that are above 50,000 and some that are below 50,000. And so, it's a very private thing, and so it's hard to actually know what the amount is or what the percentage is, right? When it's a legacy gift, when people put you in their will, their plan, they're either going to give you a dollar amount, if they give you anything, or they're going to give you a percentage. But for most people, that's a private thing, and so it's hard to know what it is. But from the ones that we do know, and that we know nationwide, it's 57, and Money for Ministry uses 50,000. Any questions on that? Okay, so what does 9 trillion look like? Just for fun here. So if you spent $10 million a day, okay, I think even some of our top athletes would probably struggle for that. If you spent $10 million a day, how many days or years do you think it would take to spend 9 trillion? And you can't whip out your phones and do the math here. You've got to try to see what you think. Throw out some numbers. Let me hear. How many years? How many years to get to 9 trillion.
Is that compound interest also?
Very good question. Is that compound? No, this is not compound interest.
9,000.
9,000 years. Anybody think higher?
You're saying years.
Years. How many years? How many years to get to 9 trillion if you spent 10 million a day? Somebody else throw another number out. I wouldn't have a clue, so just I'm not going to embarrass you. Just somebody throw something out higher than, what was the number you gave?
9,000.
9,000 years?
9,000.
Okay. Somebody else want to say lower or higher? 9,001.
Price is right.
Do I hear 9,000?
How about 2,464 years? So a little bit high on the 9,000, but I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you know, we look at Scripture and we read stories of, right, 2,000 years ago or whatever. I mean, you're talking...
$10 million a day.
Yeah, for 2,000... What's that?
Since Christ was born.
Yeah, exactly. Since Christ was born is one way to look at that. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So it just shows that it's just a number that we can't even, our minds can't even comprehend it.
I don't think our calculators have enough zeros.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. It's a good point. We'll get Elon Musk to fix that. Okay, let's put it another way. If you stacked all these bills, okay, 9 trillion in $100 bills, okay, if you stack them, how far could you go? Well, I'm going to help you out. Okay, to the moon. You're on to the right thought. There it is. It would reach the International Space Station how many times? How many times would it reach the International Space Station? Which is somewhere out there by the moon or beyond it, wherever. What do you think? Yeah. Okay. This is a tough one again. 24 times. So anyhow, all this to say that the opportunity for you as rescue missions to get even a slice of the pie that's as thin as a piece of dental floss, right? There's this huge intergenerational wealth transfer and there's huge trillions of dollars. If you get even something as thin as you can even perceive to be, your ministry will benefit tremendously. Okay? So, let's get into what is planned giving. We talked a little bit about it. I asked you what your thoughts were. So legacy planning and planned giving, legacy planning is a piece of that, is an area of stewardship that many faith-based ministries neglect. And that's real important, the word stewardship, because we like to say it's an act of worship, right? We come here, we have the music, the worship team, we have somebody come up and speak, we go to church, we give our tithes. We think of that as worship. A lot of us don't think about our legacy planning as worship. But when you put your favorite rescue mission, when your donor puts your favorite rescue mission in their will or their estate plan, that's an act of worship, and that's being steward, right? We all know we're managers of what God has entrusted to us, but this falls into that stewardship piece that a lot of ministries don't think about. Second, it's the process by which donors plan a charitable gift of assets. Now again, in our current giving, we're used to, okay, there was an earthquake, there was a flood, our air conditioning unit went out at the rescue mission, and so we communicate that, and people have the knee-jerk reaction, which is good. Wow, I got to do something. I've got to help. It's an emotional giving decision. When it comes to legacy giving, it's more of a thoughtful process. It takes some cultivation. It takes some prayer. It takes years. We like to say, on average, it takes somewhere between 3 to 5 years from the time somebody first hears about a legacy gift or planned giving to work through, process, talk to their family, and then make a gift. So it's understanding the difference between current giving, which is more emotional, and planned giving. Now, here's another thing. People think, well, planned giving, it's all about deferred giving. The legacy giving piece is, right? If somebody puts you in their will or their estate plan, that's going to happen when they go home to be with the Lord. But there's also a piece of planned giving that is current giving, and I'll touch on that, okay? And that piece is non-cash assets, and that's where a lot of the wealth in this country is. And so we'll look at that because that is part of planned giving where you can benefit from a current giving standpoint. And we have statistics to show that folks who put you in their will or their legacy plan also become larger current givers. Because a lot of times ministries think, oh boy, if somebody puts me in their legacy gift, it's going to dry up. You know, their monthly giving is going to stop. They're not going to give on a yearly basis what they used to. And it's quite the opposite. They become greater donors on a current basis as well. Any questions or comments? I want to make sure I'm pausing periodically. Good? Planned giving is part of estate planning, and many planned gifts are a result of estate planning. So I sort of already touched on that. So for charitable organizations like yours, planned giving is the process. I already talked about that. It is a process for your prospect, for your donor. They have to process some things. Used to cultivate, encourage, and empower donors to make these types of gifts. So that whole cultivation piece, we're going to look a little bit later at some specific steps that we can take, that you can take, on how to encourage and empower them as well to make this type of gift. By the way, obviously, this presentation, you know, just will be available. You can leave your card at the end. Okay? And before I move on, I want to share an example of planned giving and the part about really cultivating, encouraging, and empowering donors to think through this. There was a manufacturing plant in Colorado where I live. Makes big industrial lawnmowers, and they're yellow. And so if you see some of those, Walker Manufacturing was the name. And so it was a father with 3 sons, and he wanted to make sure that he's passing on, obviously, the business to his children, and they wanted to make sure that they also thought about how can they not only give from each child, making sure that they take care of their children and that they take care of their favorite ministries, but they wanted to have an impact in the planned giving way in the business. So what did they do? When I talk about non-cash assets, we all know, I think you all know, do you know what a donor advised fund is? So a donor advised fund is one particular vehicle that you can use when you have non-cash assets that you want to give, okay? And so what this father did with the sons is they all opened up their own donor advised fund that they can pass on to their children and their children's children. It's a giving tool that has a generational effect, but they also decided they're going to tithe 10% of the profits of the business, and they opened up a donor advised fund in the name of the business so that when dad passes on and the boys take over, that's going to continue as well. Okay? So a lot of different options here. Another slide on what is planned giving. It's a process to help your donors think through and implement other ways. I already talked about that. Beneficiaries to receive these assets must be identified. That's what I just shared. This father identified his kids, and then his kids will identify their kids or other folks that they want to be able to name. So you have to think about your beneficiaries. If you don't have kids, do you have brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles? Do you have people in the church? There's always somebody that you can name as a beneficiary of an estate plan or a legacy gift, even if you don't have children. Okay? How these beneficiaries will receive the benefits. So again, I think it's Ron Blue who said, love your children equally, treat them differently. So in the case of children, right, that wayward child, that prodigal child, if you've got 3 kids and you've got one that's prodigal, it's a personal decision, but you have to really think about, okay, how am I going to treat my beneficiaries to receive these benefits? And if one of them is really out there not following the Lord, mom and dad might say, you know what, we're just, the Lord is leading us to either not leave anything or not leave as much to that child. Or if you've got 3 children and you've got 2 of them that are, millionaires and somebody else is out on the mission field, again, that parent couple might want to say, hey, when it comes to my beneficiaries, I'm going to not just split everything in thirds, okay? And while I'm talking about that, little tangent here, has anyone heard of the concept of a child named Charity? Nope? Okay, a child named Charity. So my wife and I, for example, have 3 kids, 3 adult children. So if we took a pie and said, okay, we're gonna name our 3 children in our plan, we would divide that pie into 3 pieces. What a child named Charity does, and a lot of folks haven't heard of this, which is why I share it, because it's really a simple concept, very effective. How about, hey, instead of dividing it amongst the 3 kids, let's make Charity our 4th child. So you take the pie and you divide it into 4 pieces. So instead of each child in our case getting 33.3%, and we got 1 daughter and 2 sons, so I've got our daughter getting more than the 2 sons if it was a third. But when you throw in that Charity, then it becomes 25%. So again, it's a great, just a great simple concept of talking to your donors about, have you ever considered including, the rescue mission in your plan or other favorite charities that you have, Christian schools, etc., churches. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I just met with a donor, and she lost her husband last year, and she has 2 daughters, and we were having this very conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, her 2 daughters do not share Christian upbringing and principles that mom and dad and grandparents had established, and she is struggling to know what to do. And there's quite a pot of, she still has considerable farmland, which in this area can command a very healthy per acre price. And she said, I'm just struggling with what is the right thing to do. And because she knows that a transfer of wealth could very potentially go to support causes that they would in no way, shape, or form support. Plus, they're on the wrong side of the political spectrum. It just goes down the list, and
It's a tough.
she's torn. I mean, that's an understatement.
And that's why I say it's a personal decision, but I think parents need to have that conversation amongst themselves and need to pray about it and really seek the Lord for what would the Lord have them to do, because it's tough.
And that's exactly how we ended the conversation was we
Yep.
were going to regroup, but I said over the time that we had met to the next time that we meet, I said, let's both be in prayer as to how the Lord would lead that decision, because she has all of her planning it's already set up, and should I make changes? Well, needless to say, I have to be very careful, but to your point, because I had, in essence, not used the word charity as an additional child, but that was certainly the concept of what is your plan to incorporate any ministry into your final wishes.
And what was the answer?
Well, she's already had that thought. Now it's just whether or not she changes the percentage. Because right now, certainly the 2 girls would stand to inherit the lion's share of the estate. But again, your point with both girls being not only one's well-to-do, one isn't, but both are in many ways prodigal, and so a lot to kind of digest.
Yep. Very good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's an individual decision, and your answer was perfect. Seek the Lord and see how the Lord speaks to you on this, but just realize that it could affect your relationship going forward with that particular child. So decisions need to be made about who should act in certain roles, right? If somebody, I see a couple little kids running around here, right? So young couple, our middle son, they're going to have their 2nd child this week or next week. And so, you have to say, okay, hey, who do we want to name as guardians, executors? So a lot of different things to think about. And I don't want to get into the technical piece about this, but I want you to be aware that these are issues that have to be discussed. And so incorporating lifestyle values in the legacy documents is crucial too. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that. We think about a gift in will or a legacy gift as that financial piece because that's what we take care of first. But there's a whole second piece about what are mom and dad's or grandma and grandpa's values? What kind of what kind of legacy do they want to leave as far as affecting generations to come? And there's a concept called an ethical will or a legacy love letter. And I'm going to give you some example. I'll give you an actual example of what a legacy love letter looks like. But that's a complementary piece. So once somebody has put you in their will, it's great. You thank them. And by the way, you're going to want to make sure that you stay in touch with them at least twice a year. Why? Because a legacy gift or a gift in the will is a revocable gift, right? And so if you say, hey, this is great, I just got 2 new legacy givers coming in, and you don't get in touch with them for the next 5, 10 years, well, the Lord can change their heart, can change their passion. And again, my wife and I are an example where the Christian school where our kids attended until 8th grade didn't do a good job of that. So 10, 15 years later, as they're young adults and they're leaving the house, we took the Christian school out of our will. Had they stayed in touch with us a little bit more, we probably wouldn't have. But so there's also that part of it, is that don't just say, oh, this is great, we got a legacy gift. You have to also make sure that you're staying in touch. So incorporating lifestyle values in the documents, I'll come back to that and show you what an ethical will is all about. Now, here's probably a word you're not familiar with. Anybody ever heard of plannual giving? Now break down the word. What is in that word plannual? First part is plan, second part is annual. So you can figure it out. What we're talking about here, this concept came out maybe 15 years ago, and again, not well known, but mixing the idea of, hey, let's communicate to our prospects and our donors both the opportunity for annual giving, which is what most of us do, right? But then let's also communicate the opportunity for planning, which is the planned gift. So you mesh the two. So what's it look like? Effective planned giving marketing involves integration, not separation, of giving offices and roles. Now, I worked at a ministry a few years ago where there were silos. And so to be totally honest, what happens is the development team often, they've got some numbers they're trying to hit, right? And then if there's a planned giving office, they're working. And then sometimes then there'll be a major giver that is on the development team, and they're like, well, I don't know if I should, well, I guess, yeah, I got to bring in John from the planned giving team because he's talking about making a gift of real estate. And so it brings him in, and then the question becomes, well, am I going to lose credit for John because now the credit for John is going to go to the planned giving guy or the planned giving gal. And so silos have to be broken down. And so I think ministries can do a much better job of when it comes time to evaluating performance. It's not about, okay, development director, you didn't really hit your number, but you helped plan giving. You passed on from your relationship 2 folks to the plan giving person. So let's look at